UFC 276 is stacked. It is arguably the best card of the year. There are so many great fights from top to bottom. The prelims are great. The early prelims have some amazing fights on it, and the main card is probably the best of the year. There are two title fights on this card. Leon Edwards is defending his welterweight title against Colby Covington, and Alexandre Pantoja, the new flyweight champion, is defending his belt against Brandon Royval. But let's talk about some of these prelims first, and then we'll talk about the fights that people actually care about. Now, this is not my prediction video. That will be out next week. I just want to go through and look at some of these fights and talk about stuff I won't be talking about in that video, and also talk about fights and preview fights that I won't be breaking down. Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov is opening the card, and this is a great fight. Randy Brown is always fun to watch, and Salikov is a guy who basically just goes out there and knocks everyone out in the first round. Martin Buday is facing Shamil Gassiev, and this is an interesting fight. Martin Buday is on a 12-fight win streak. He's 13-1 and a very interesting prospect in this heavyweight division, and he is facing Shamil Gassiev, who is making his UFC debut. He is 1-0. With 100% striking accuracy. He has thrown 4 punches and landed 4 punches. Andre Fili versus Lucas Almeida is an interesting fight. Fili is in a hardcore band, which is so sick. And this is an interesting fight. Almeida is an interesting younger prospect with some potential. He's finished both of his UFC fights. Beat Pat Sabatini in his last fight. He's 14-2, so we'll see how far he gets in this featherweight division. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Cody Durden is an alright fight, I guess. Casey O'Neill versus Irene Lipsky is an okay fight as well. Even though she just lost to Jennifer Maia, I still think Casey O'Neill has some potential. She's still pretty young. Irene Aldana and Carol Rosa it's a fight. It's nothing crazy. A high-level women's fight. Probably not going to be the most entertaining fight. But let's dive into that main event. Leon Edwards is looking to defend his title for the second time against Colby Covington. There are times where I completely forget Colby Covington exists. It's because this guy just doesn't fight at all. He's had a 2-year layoff. It has been almost 2 years since he last fought, and it seemed like they just gave him this title shot out of nowhere. Colby just randomly appeared as a backup for Leon vs. Usman 3, and Dana immediately said after that fight that Colby was next to fight for the title, with his reason being because Colby came over and cut the weight. Despite the fact that Colby hadn't fought in over a year, he was only on a 1-fight win streak. He was 2-2 in his last 4. He already had 2 title shots against Usman and lost both. And there just seemed to be much more deserving contenders. I remember for a little while after this fight got announced, or Dana said Colby was getting the next title shot, people were like speculating that Colby blackmailed Dana into giving him another title shot. And this is really his last chance to win the belt. He's not going to get a 4th title shot if he loses. And honestly, if he loses, he might just retire. And although he's not the most deserving of a title shot, there are so many guys who deserve it more. Obviously, Bilal deserves it the most. I would argue Gilbert Burns, even coming off a loss, deserves it more. Shavkat deserves it more. Even Stephen Thompson might deserve it more. And Islam. Even though I don't like this whole jumping up a division, going for double champ status after just winning the belt, Islam would probably still deserve it more than Colby, who doesn't have a single ranked win in the UFC. Even though Colby is not the most deserving of a title shot, this is a better fight than pretty much all of those guys I just named, except for maybe Shavkat. It should be an entertaining fight. It should also be an extremely competitive fight. We don't know how Colby's going to look after the long layoff, but if he comes back anywhere near the same guy that he was when he fought Jorge Masvidal, he has a very good chance at winning this fight. His wrestling style is much more dangerous to Leon than Kamaru's was because of his chain wrestling, how relentless he is with his takedowns. Kamaru will sometimes just sit in your guard and look for ground and pound, whereas Colby is constantly looking to transition. He'll take your back. When Leon got taken down against Usman, he would constantly give up his back to get up. which is something he can do against Kamaru because Kamaru pretty much has zero grappling, but against Colby, who has pretty decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's something he's not going to want to do because Colby will absolutely take his back like he did against Masvidal and ride the rounds out, constantly threatening chokes, looking for ground and pound. But on the feet, it is a much more interesting fight. Leon is the much better striker. He's more powerful. He's faster. He's way more technical. Colby does put a pace on his opponents, which is something that Kamaru doesn't really do. Colby's definitely going to test Leon's cardio, throwing out a bunch of strikes, constantly shooting for takedowns. But because of the sheer amount of volume Colby throws, he leaves himself open to counters. Colby's also not the most technical striker. And Leon is super precise with his strikes, has a very good left hand, a very good jab. If anyone can pick out those counters and find them, it is Leon. I think this fight is going to come down to who pressures the other, because if Colby is pressuring Leon, gets his back towards the fence, Colby can shoot, use the fence to take him down. Much easier because he's going to have a hard time taking Leon down in the center of the octagon. But if Leon pressures Colby back, with calculated pressure, not getting over aggressive, Colby's gonna have a much harder time shooting in from distance, gonna have a hard time getting around that reach, around the kicks of Leon. I'm not going to give a prediction since this fight is literally a week away, but it should be a really good fight. Next, we're going to move into that co-main event. Alexandre Pantoja defends his belt against Brandon Royval. I'm a little surprised they went with Royval over Amir Albazi because Pantoja and Royval didn't fight each other too long ago, and Pantoja made it look pretty easy, submitted him in the second round. Pantoja just won the belt, had a fight of the year contender with Brandon Moreno, a very close fight. I thought he won, but a lot of people still think Brandon Moreno should have got the decision. Brandon Royval has put together a nice little win streak of his own since his back-to-back losses against Brandon Moreno and Alexandre Pantoja, where he beat Rogerio Bontorin in an extremely close fight, then beat Matt Schnell and Mateusz Nicolau, finished them both. But overall, I don't think this is a great stylistic matchup for Royval. He's got to finish Pantoja. I don't see him winning a decision. His way to win this fight is either by knocking Pantoja out on the feet, which he's going to have a hard time doing, or by submitting Pantoja on the ground. He has some power in his hands, but I would say Pantoja has the overall boxing advantage for sure, and Pantoja has a great chin. Took very clean, hard punches from Brandon Moreno and never got knocked out. And then on the ground, Royval is a very good grappler, has very good submissions, but Pantoja is a better wrestler, can defend the takedowns. And then Pantoja himself can take down Royval, get into top position, and then he's just better there. His control on the ground is so good. He's also got very good jiu-jitsu of his own. Not as good as Royval's, I would say. But he did submit Royval in their first fight, and I honestly don't think this fight goes much differently. So much for not giving predictions. I just don't think this is a great stylistic matchup for Albazi. But it should definitely be a fun fight for as long as it lasts, and I'm really pulling here for Pantoja. I like his story. It's crazy how just a few fights ago, like a year and a half ago, he was driving DoorDash to make ends meet because the UFC wouldn't pay him. And now he's going to make a lot of money as the champion, getting pay-per-view points on one of the biggest cards of the year, so definitely happy for him. And then we go to Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Stephen Thompson. Winner of this fight probably gets a title shot. Nobody wants to fight Shavkat, so credit to Stephen Thompson, credit to Jeff Neal, credit to Neil Magny, all these guys for stepping up and fighting this Kazakhstani monster. This guy is so good, a good wrestler, good grappler, good striker. A nightmare of a matchup for Stephen Thompson, who at this point in his career doesn't have the best takedown defense. Back in the day, he had decent takedown defense, but as he's gotten older and slower, and as these new generation of wrestlers who have a new style he's not used to seeing come in, he just hasn't been able to defend takedowns. Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns took him down and controlled him, so I don't see why Shavkat couldn't do the same. Where Wonderboy's going to have to win this fight, he has to knock him out, capitalize on the fact that Shavkat does not move his head. Shavkat likes to fight from range on the feet like he did against Jeff Neal, uses jab, uses cross, fight like a sniper, but he is not going to out-jab, out-strike Wonderboy. Wonderboy is probably the best striker in this division. It's him or Leon. Shavkat's best punch is the jab, but he is not going to out-jab Wonderboy. Wonderboy can fight this fight at range, from distance, use the kicks when they are in opposite stances. If he switches into southpaw, he can look for the body kicks and the head kicks. In orthodox, he can look for the leg kicks, and side kicks from both stances are going to be very effective. Definitely a weapon he's going to have to use a lot in this fight. He's one of the only guys that use side kicks, and he uses them extremely effectively, and those are going to be a good weapon against Shavkat. And Shavkat's biggest weakness is his striking defense. He does not move his head at all. He moves forward and backwards on a straight line, which is going to make it a lot easier for Wonderboy to hit him. But if this fight touches the ground once, it could be over. Shavkat's submissions are elite. He doesn't even need to take Wonderboy to the ground to submit him. He could submit him on the feet, but he's definitely going to have his best chance at submitting Wonderboy on the ground, taking him down. He has very good wrestling, and as I said, Wonderboy does not have great takedown defense. And then on the ground, he can look for a variety of different submissions. I think this fight is a lot closer than people think, and I think it's definitely ending in a finish. I think either Stephen Thompson knocks him out or Shavkat submits him, and I think it's very likely to be a first round finish from either guy. But it should be a really fun fight for as long as it lasts, and maybe Shavkat goes out there and tests himself in the striking. I could see that happening. He wants to go out there and see how he fares against Wonderboy, and then entertains a striking far too long and gets caught because of it. But for however long this fight lasts, it should be a good one. Stephen Thompson and Shavkat Rakhmonov are two of my favorite fighters to watch. They're both so entertaining. Stephen Thompson specifically is one of my favorite fighters of all time, one of the guys who got me into the sport, and massive credit to him taking this fight against one of the scariest guys on the planet, especially when he had an Garry fight he could go to, or a Kamaru Usman fight that was rumored for a while. And the winner of this fight will probably get a title shot, because who wouldn't want to see Wonderboy versus Leon or Shavkat versus Leon? Leon and Wonderboy are probably the two best strikers in the division. It would be a crazy technical chess match on the feet, but I think Leon would win. He probably would attempt takedowns, which is kind of boring, and just out wrestle Wonderboy. Shavkat's a little more interesting. I think Shavkat would beat Leon, because Leon gives up his back whenever he gets taken down, and Shavkat has very good submissions and can punish Leon for that. Then we go to Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett, the people's main event. This is basically both guys' last chance, because if Tony can't beat Paddy, he should just call it a career. And if Paddy can't beat Tony, then all this talk about him being a champion and him being a future superstar and contender is just done. I think it really comes down to two things. Can Paddy take Tony down, or does Tony take Paddy down? I don't know. If Tony attempts a takedown and this fight goes to the ground and Tony gets submitted, I don't even know what the fuck's going on anymore. And how do both guys' chins favor on the feet? Tony was known for having good takedown defense back in the day, but recently it has not looked great. But at the same time, Paddy is not the best wrestler. So if Tony could stop anyone's takedowns, it is Paddy. And then on the feet, I think Tony has the advantage. The only thing I'm worried about is his chin. Tony still has power. We all know power is the last thing to go in fighters. He blasted Bobby Green, almost knocked him down. I think he also hurt Michael Chandler at times. And we all know Paddy's striking defense is terrible. He doesn't move his head. He keeps his hands low, keeps his chin straight up in the air. So Tony's gonna have a much easier time hitting Paddy than a lot of his past opponents. But Paddy does have a very good chin. He hasn't really gone up against a guy who hits too hard. Tony will probably be the hardest hitter he's ever faced, but he was getting tagged a lot against Jared Gordon. And if Jared Gordon had Tony Ferguson's power, I don't think Paddy would have survived. But at the same time, Tony doesn't have the best chin. He's been knocked out in a lot of his past fights, and he also doesn't have very good striking defense. He's very hittable, and Paddy is very tenacious, very powerful. He likes to look for the knockout on the feet and get super aggressive. So Tony could counter him, but he could also hit Tony and knock Tony out. If Tony had the chin he had a few years ago, I would pick him easily. But man, this is a tough fight to pick. I still don't know who I'm picking yet, and this fight's only a week away, and it got announced months ago. I've been going back and forth on this fight for months. I think Paddy's like a 3-1, 4-1 favorite, which I don't agree with at all. I think Tony is a good bet if you're going to go put money on someone. I think it's all going to come down to whether or not Paddy can take Tony down and whether Tony's chin can hold up, because if it can, I think Tony will win this fight. But it should be a really good fight. If Tony loses, it's over. Call it a career. If Tony wins, then go fight like Jim Miller at UFC 300 and then call it a career. And if Paddy wins this fight, then you got to look up possibly into the low rankings of the lightweight division or some of the top guys that aren't ranked. But to be honest, I don't see Paddy beating anyone who is currently ranked in the lightweight division. Even a lot of the guys who aren't ranked, I think Paddy would lose to. Like Jared Gordon. He lost that fight to Jared Gordon. He should have lost every round, and somehow the judges gave it to him. I was never super high on Paddy. I thought at most he would be like a 10th ranked guy, 10 to 12 ranked guy, lower in the lightweight rankings, but now I don't know if he'll ever even be ranked. And then we move to Ian Garry versus Vicente Luque, the guy who everyone hates now, the guy whose wife is a wag. I haven't really been following that whole situation. I don't really care, but everyone hates Ian Garry now, and he is kind of unlikable, I'm gonna be honest. All the shit he said to Neil Magny, I didn't really like, when Neil Magny is one of the nicest, most respectful fighters. And then under one of Vicente Luque's Instagram posts, he said something insulting his religion. I forget what he said. When that's his friend, Vicente Luque and Ian Garry are friends. And Ian Garry was insulting his religion, so I'm not the biggest Ian Garry fan. He's a very good striker, definitely has some potential, could see him in the top 5 at some point in his career. And this is a good fight for him against Vicente Luque, a guy who's probably not going to take him to the ground and is just much worse overall on the feet. Ian Garry fights like a sniper, has very good smooth kicks, a good jab, a good right hand, and Vicente Luque likes to fight more like a boxer, so Ian Garry can use those kicks to keep him at range. And I don't really see Luque attempting any takedowns, and if he does, I think Ian will be able to defend most of them. Now we're going to go to the featured prelim. Josh Emmett is taking on Bryce Mitchell on short notice. Emmett was originally supposed to face Giga Chikadze. Giga pulled out, and now we got Bryce Mitchell, which is a good replacement. Giga is an amazing fighter for the first round and then gasses out in the second. But this is an interesting fight. Josh Emmett hits really hard. On the feet, I'm not sure Bryce Mitchell wants to mess around too much. I think Emmett could catch him. Mitchell doesn't have the best striking defense or the best striking in general. Mitchell's really going to want to take this fight to the ground because that's where he's going to have the advantage. That's where he's going to do his best work, the most damage with his grappling. He has very good submissions. But can he take the fight to the ground? Emmett is not the best wrestler. He is just a strong guy with the weirdest ab genetics I've ever seen. That shit looked crazy. But he got taken down against Yair Rodriguez and got submitted by Yair. And if Yair can submit him, who doesn't have bad grappling, but I wouldn't say it's better than Bryce Mitchell, even though I think Mitchell's grappling is a bit overrated, then I think Mitchell can also take him down, control him, and submit him. But the 2-week notice thing is a little worrying. Man, the fall of Cody Garbrandt. This guy went from champion, stunting on Dominic Cruz, dominating him, to a guy who can barely win a fight. His last fight against Trevin Jones was one of the most boring fights I've ever watched. And this fight will tell us if Cody is washed. Brian Kelleher is a guy who many use as a stepping stone. You look at the better guys of the bantamweight division, Mario Bautista, Umar Nurmagomedov, Ricky Simone, Cody Stamann, they all beat him because he is not in the upper echelon of bantamweight fighters, but he also beats guys like Pilarte and Kroom, guys who aren't in the upper echelon of bantamweight fighters. He's like right in the middle. So if Cody cannot beat him, it is probably time to call it a career. It could be an interesting fight, but I also said that about the Trevin Jones fight, and that shit was so boring. Cody just basically moved around the ring for 3 rounds. Cody definitely does have the advantage here. He can use his footwork to move around constantly, switch off at different angles, try and avoid the takedowns, but at this point, I just don't know about Cody. I think he's done at the top level. But if he wins this fight, I think him versus Dominic Cruz would be a fun fight at UFC 300, a retirement fight for both guys, the bad blood between them two. But at this point, I think Cruz is just better. And then the one fight I really wanted to talk about, because I'm not going to be breaking it down in my prediction video, is Alonzo Menifield versus Dustin Jacoby. Dustin Jacoby is one of my favorite lower ranked fighters. He's so entertaining. Go back and watch some of his kickboxing fights. He fought Alex Pereira. He did get knocked out in the first round. But go back and watch his fights against like Simon Marcus. I think he fought for a title in Glory against Simon Marcus, if I'm not mistaken. Kickboxing fan fans, correct me down below. I don't watch kickboxing. But if you haven't done so, go back and watch some of his glory fights. Some of my favorite kickboxing fights to go back and watch. And in the UFC, he's been decent. Very good kickboxer, obviously. He just needs to work more on his takedowns, needs to work more on his fight IQ. In his fight against Rakhmonov, he could have won. He just didn't have the fight IQ. He didn't have any urgency on the feet to go. I think he even hurt Asmat at times and he just didn't go for the finish. Accepted being on his back, and Asmat is an undefeated guy who has a lot of potential, and Jacoby could have won. He also got completely robbed against Khalil Roundtree. In my opinion, he should have won that fight. I definitely favor him over Alonzo Menifield. You have to attempt takedowns, and I think Menifield's going to strike with him, and there are very few guys in this light heavyweight division that would beat Dustin Jacoby in a pure striking match. He's way too technical of a kickboxer, so I think Jacoby gets it done. But anyways, that is the end of the video. If you are new here or you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe, turn on post notifications so you never miss an upload. I will have my prediction video out for this card next week, probably on Wednesday, so subscribe so you don't miss that. Like the video if you did enjoy. Leave your predictions and opinions on this card in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.